I was a little nervous when they told me, when I first saw the schedule, that I was going to be standing between you and cocktails, and so I'm much happier to know that you've had your cocktails, and now you're ready to sign on the dotted line and buy a private jet from me, because that's what I do. But that's not what I'm here to talk about today. Today, I'm going to talk about how I see small business owners using private aviation and without buying a private jet. So that's a little bit farther into my presentation. Let me see how this clicker works. No, I just turned it off. Am I going? Okay. So have you ever wondered why some people seem to have the life they want? They have time to spend with their family. They can pursue things that make them happy, while others can never seem to find to make their dreams become a reality? Why are some people able to grow their businesses in tough environments while others are floundering or even failing? Why are some people expanding their sphere of influence while others are just trying to stay afloat with their own message? There's a competitive advantage that I promise you increases sales, retains jobs, builds local businesses or economies, and improves people's quality of life, and it's less costly than you think. Today, you're going to discover the power of using a competitive differentiator for small businesses that creates more time, more influence, and more peace in your life or business. I'm going to open your eyes to the benefits of private aviation and its relative affordability. It's not just for the ultra-rich and famous. It's for regular leaders with a vision for significance, people just like you. But before we dig in, I've got to warn you about something that's critically important. And not paying attention to this will ensure that you're like these people here, stuck in an airport, listening to crying kids and losing sleep. If you're as old as me, which most of you are not, so this may be more applicable to your parents, it's when you were using a fax machine when it was time to switch to a computer. Or maybe a little bit closer to this generation, when you were using a flip phone when your kids had already requested a smartphone. Here's the third one. You're still flying in the Greyhound of the skies when there's something else available to you. And I call it a martyr mindset. Using technology or a private plane is not about blowing money that you could be spending on saving people from the homeless people from the streets or feeding starving kids in Africa. It's about using technology or private aviation in the right way. It maximizes two of your most precious assets, time and brain space, so that you can deliver more of whatever it is that makes you brilliant. I'm sure you'll agree, trying to build a business has obstacles and challenges. You might have a really tight schedule. It might be compounded by crazy airline schedules or traffic or waiting in line at TSA. But if you're a world changer at any level, there's no way to accommodate all the time that you need. We've all used the line, if there were only more hours in the day, I could get more done, or I could do that thing that you've asked me to do, or I could help my kids. And sometimes we even mean that, like if we have more, sometimes we use this as an excuse, right? Like, oh, I would if I could, but I'm too busy. But sometimes we actually mean it, like we really would help that person if we could. So what I want to do is bust the myth that says that you're selfish if you're spending money on private aviation. There are thousands of amazing success stories using private flight as a competitive resource. I did an interview earlier and told the woman that was interviewing me that 85% of private planes in the United States are not owned by celebrities or Fortune 500 companies. They're owned by small and mid-sized business owners. and they use them as a competitive differentiator. So today I'm going to teach you how you can do that too. So I'm passionate about this because I see so many people doing this kind of thing where they're wasting time. You have hours and hours of your week spent in airport terminals or in baggage claims. And I really have this strong feeling about not having this martyr mindset. And where that started for me was at my grandparents' house. So these are my grandparents. My pop-up was a war hero. He had a huge heart. He loved people. He had 2 Purple Hearts. He served in World War II and Korea. But I loved my Nana. My Nana was prepared. She was smart. She was ambitious. And she served as the executive secretary of a powerful Atlanta CEO. And he paid her really well. Well enough that she could afford a used Mercedes. That's probably the reason I drive a Mercedes today. I'm following in her footsteps. But Nana bought this fabulous Mercedes and parked it in the carport. She used it on Sundays to go to church because she didn't want to drive it to work because she thought it would make her look pretentious. So every morning when I was staying with her, I would see her get up and get dressed and walk to the corner and get on the city bus and change buses at the depot to get to Rich's in downtown Atlanta and walk in her high heels 3 blocks to her office when she had a Mercedes and she had a garage spot and she could have been spending more time with her family or with, playing paper dolls with me, which is what I wanted her to be doing. So I felt like Nana was a little bit of a martyr because she didn't want to be pretentious. And I see a lot of business owners do that now. When they could be flying privately, when they could be spending a little bit, maybe just a little bit more money, sometimes even less money, flying privately, maximizing their time, and impacting more people with their business or their message. This is my aspirational chick. I think she's really cool. So there are a lot of people who have the opportunity to take that time and brain space and apply it to something else. But what I see a lot of small business owners doing is what this guy's doing. Flying in the night before so you're not late to the meeting, spending the night in a hotel room, getting lousy sleep, being away from your family, probably developing bad posture sitting like that. And it doesn't have to be that way. Private aviation is a tool. It's a business tool. Today's competitive landscape, I'm sure you can agree, is changing, and it's changing fast. And so I looked at some people that you might know of to prove my point here. I'm breaking this clicker. Warren Buffett has said that you will never see eye to eye if you're not face to face. He flies privately. He actually owns a company that has a few hundred jets, so he's able to do that pretty often. And then I also find it interesting that both of our presidential candidates last year, believed in the same thing. In this 2012 Condé Nast article that highlighted a 19,000-mile record-setting round-the-world trip as Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton said, people actually expect you to show up, to make the effort and demonstrate the respect, to sit across the table and look eye to eye. It reflects a commitment to the relationship that you cannot get from sending an email or doing a video conference. In the same time frame, Donald Trump was interviewed about the benefits of business travel, and he answered, "Nothing beats personal interaction. It's the best way to build a rapport, and that can only enhance business performance." Now, I know you all are wondering about this slide. I thought it was hysterical. It was in Huffington Post, illustrating that people use Photoshop very creatively these days, and since it's Friday afternoon, I thought it'd be fun to put up the picture of our two presidents sharing McDonald's on Trump's plane. It's not real, trust me. But President Trump's use of private aviation may have been the key to his successful presidential election. I met his Boeing 757 crew when they were here in Austin in August. And the pilot was showing me on his phone, he had a counter that there were 77 days left in the election. And he said, that means I'm gonna be flying that plane another 200 plus times between now and when this is over, because they were in an average of 3 cities a day, 3 to 4 cities a day. And a number of experts have observed that those trips provided face-to-face interaction with hundreds of thousands of Americans who may have swung that vote. So switching to something a little bit less volatile, because everyone loves Walmart, Sam Walton, another American billionaire, used private aviation to build the Walmart empire. His first plane was a 2-seater air coupe that cost $1,850, and it revolutionized his fledgling business. Now, he was using this plane at a time when he and his team would go to New York to talk to investors, and they would sleep 4 to a hotel room. So you know he was being frugal when he bought the plane. But in his autobiography, he said, there's no question whatsoever we could not have done what we did back then if I hadn't had airplanes. I bought that first plane for business, to travel between the stores and keep in touch with what was going on. But once we really started rolling out the stores, the airplane turned into a great tool for scouting real estate. We were probably 10 years ahead of most other retails in scouting locations from the air, and we got a lot of great ones that way. He said from up in the air, we could check out traffic flows, see which way cities and towns were growing, and evaluate the location of the competition, if there was any. Today, Walmart operates one of the largest fleets of private aircraft anywhere in the world. They also have the most female pilots, which I happen to love. They provide a classic example of middle management using private aviation as a business tool. Walmart jets do a lot of one-day trips, getting those management teams home to spend time with their families in the evening. And they often travel with an entire team and have multiple destinations in one day. That's efficient, and I think we've learned this week that efficiency is a competitive differentiator. Now, all of you may not have presidential aspirations. You may not want your name on the side of a jet. You may not want a fleet of jets and have to employ female pilots. But if you want to break a record, break a glass ceiling, or break down a competitor, you should look to the skies. There are hundreds of other stories of companies growing, expanding geographically, or increasing profits with the use of private aviation. They all started with one flight on one plane. So a friend I'll call Jill is a financial advisor with several offices around Texas. She signed up for a service here in Texas that I recommended to John Garrett before he got on stage earlier, and she has offices in Dallas, Houston, and Austin. And this service called Rise Aviation has flights between Dallas, Austin, and Houston. And so Jill, for $2,000 a month, which is less than her previous travel budget flying on Southwest or American, is able to access 60 flights, scheduled flights between those cities, and she can show up just a couple minutes before her flight and travel that way. It's pretty phenomenal. The other thing is that those are shared flights, and she meets other executives on board of those flights. She's a financial advisor. They have money. I'm not going to give away her secrets, but I'm sure y'all can connect the dots there. So, by now, you know that private aviation could be a competitive differentiator for you, but how do you fly? How do you plan for it? And how do you budget for it? That's what I want to talk a little bit about now. So how many people have heard of Netjets? Great. They're a pretty well-known brand. Netjets is probably the most expensive option that I'm going to talk to you today about, other than buying a plane. So Netjets is a fractional provider. So think of it a little bit like a timeshare. So you buy 1/16 up to a quarter of the aircraft, and that gives you a set number of hours on the aircraft per year. The nice thing about buying a fraction is that you can use that bonus depreciation for your taxes if you want to. But with this, let's say you have 8 people on your team and you regularly fly across the country. So you'd buy a mid-size jet, and with that mid-size jet, you might pay $1 million for the jet, and then $15,000 a month for a management fee, plus $4,000 an hour for the flight. So that seems really expensive to a small business owner, but I wanted to start at this point and work my way down to the things that are more affordable so that you understand kind of where we stand in all of this. So the next thing that I want to talk about is jet cards. And so Netjets offers a jet card through Marquis Jets, and there are several other providers that do it. On that same, you buy them in hours of like 25 or 50-hour blocks, and on that same jet that I was talking about, you could fly 8 people across the country. You're probably paying $150,000 to $180,000 for those 25 hours. The next thing I want to talk about is Ad-Hoc Charter. So this is when a trip comes up and you need to go somewhere. You can go on Expedia and book an airline, or you can go and book an Ad-Hoc Charter. So this is a really small plane. This is a piston aircraft, and these can be chartered, somewhere around $1,100 an hour. And then on the other end of the spectrum is Vista Jet, which is an operator in Europe, which is very swanky. Can you advance my next slide for me? There we go. So Vista Jet books out at $11,000 to $16,000 an hour, but they can take you anywhere in the world with 24 hours notice. They'll even have your favorite movies on board and Nobu if you want it. They can have a helicopter meet you at the other end. It's full service. So the important thing to understand when you book with either of these, I think it's just stuck, is that safety is really, really important. A lot of people, the first question they ask when they call asking about a charter is there Wi-Fi? And yes, that may be very important, but it's also really important to know that you're using an authorized charter operator, that they're complying with FAA regulations, that their pilots are experienced and they're going through drug testing and all of that kind of stuff. So it's important to ask about safety in addition to asking about the Wi-Fi. So this brings me to a lot of really interesting new operations. So this particular one's called Jet Smarter. And Jet Smarter and the next one I'll talk about, Wheels Up, are competing to be the Uber of the skies, if you will. I don't think they'll ever actually get there, but it's pretty interesting. So can you go back to the Jet Smarter app? So this is really interesting. Jet Smarter has a subscription model membership fee. You pay that up front. Depending on when you're on their website, it's either $3,000 or $9,000, but it gives you free flights between certain city pairs. So if you live in New York and you want to go to Miami, you're free on that flight, and you might be sitting next to somebody super interesting. You can see up here that on this empty leg that they're selling from Oakland to Fort Lauderdale, there's one free seat, and if you want to take your spouse along, it's $1,900. So flying first class across the country is just about the same thing. Here you don't have to go through security, you don't have to wait for baggage, all that kind of stuff. So really interesting application. And you book online, they've got some really great things going on. So if you go on to the Wheels Up slide, Wheels Up also has a subscription model. You're not buying per seat, you're buying the whole plane. And so that's a really great way to buy as well. It's about $18,000 to join Wheels Up, and then you pay an annual renewal fee after that. And then you're either paying $4,000 for a King Air or $7,000 an hour for Ricky Fowler's Citation XLS. So he's both have celebrity ambassadors, both have the opportunity sometimes to meet celebrities or do other really once-in-a-lifetime kinds of opportunities. So Wheels Up and Jet Smarter, both subscription models, both are really, both are unique in what they offer. Wheels Up gives you 24 hours, they'll take you anywhere. Their rates are kind of high, I think, but the reason that that they make them that way is so that there are no surprises. You're not being charged for a pilot's overnight. You're not being charged a fuel surcharge. You're not being charged if you need the aircraft to relocate. You only pay for the time that you're on the plane, which people generally like that simplicity. So then moving on to a couple of other things, the next slide is about Jet Suite X. So a former JetBlue CEO founded this company, and at first it was just a charter company selling charter on small planes. And then they bought a few Embraer 135s. Some of you may have flown on those before, or a little bit bigger version of that. If you've flown on kind of a smaller plane with 2 seats on one side and 1 seat on the other on a regular aircraft carrier. So this is a similar plane to those, but as you can see, you walk out just like this and get on your plane. So you claim your baggage plane side. You don't go through security. You've gone through a background check before you can purchase the ticket or get on the plane. You don't have to go through a metal detector. And it's a much easier way to fly. Because Alex is a former JetBlue executive, you book this in the same way that you book a regular airline flight. So the problem is they only have flights mostly in California with a flight to Vegas, so limited there. The next one is another California company called Surf Air, and Surf Air flies between city pairs in California, some of the smaller airports, and this is where we get down into that $2,000 a month thing, where you're paying that membership fee, $2,000 a month, just like Rise Aviation here in Texas, and you can fly unlimited flights. The limitation with Surf Air is that you can only book 2 flights in advance. You can't book a flight every day for a month. So you'd book 2, you'd take those flights, and then you book 2 more. If you want to book more than that, you just pay a little bit more money. And then Rise Aviation, which I told you about earlier with my friend Jill, this is what the interior of the aircraft looks like. So you can get a little bit of a feel for that. It's pretty amazing. And then who likes control in here? Any small business owners? Control? Nobody? Man, y'all are lying. We all love control. PlaneSmart is a company based here in Texas. I think they're based at the Addison Airport. And they offer aircraft fractional, rental, and leasing for smaller planes like this Cirrus SR-22 that Angelina Jolie flies. So, and with PlaneSmart, they'll either provide a pilot for you, or they'll teach you how to fly the plane yourself, and you can just rent it and fly yourself. So there are a ton of options with private aviation, some of them big jets, some of them small 4-seater planes like this, but it's a great way to get around without wasting time in airports. So on that note, I'm gonna leave you with time is money. Don't waste yours. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me.